this September 20th, 2018. The Frontliners Chairman Mao, Mr. Ofono Pondo are here. The guests, Honorable Sechikubo Theodore, Honorable Matthias Mpuga, and Mr. Andrew Mwenda, veteran journalist and CEO of the Independent magazine. And we are looking at... Old man of the clan. No. The new introduction is opponent of the opposition. Maybe the opposition is the opposition. Ofono Pondo, there were so many questions that came off social media. Are there going to be arrests? Mugabe is asking. Julius is saying, when do we know when intelligence is wrong? Maybe you can help advise him on that. And then Kanyike is saying that this intelligence was wrong. And Kuchi is saying, is it Bobi, Honorable Chagulanyi, who is responsible for, you know, the beating, the disruptions along the road and all that?
Well, first of all...
Start by responding to those.
We call him Theo.
Honorable Theo.
Honorable Theo. But first of all, it is true sometimes intelligence may be wrong. In some cases, intelligence is accurate, is valid. The reason Uganda is relatively stable than many years ago is because over time our intelligence has been improving. Secondly, sometimes we share intelligence with the general population on the need-to-know basis. Sometimes we don't share intelligence, we act on it. Yes, arrests can be made, prosecution can be made, we can get success at prosecution. Sometimes because evidence is not gathered properly, you may fail at securing conviction at prosecution. Third, sometimes you gather intelligence not to arrest, not to prosecute, but to neutralize a threat. I said earlier on that in this particular case, intelligence was gathered, the threat has been successfully neutralized. And you have seen Bobi Wine was accompanied as a VIP back home.
So he was the threat?
His hooligans were a threat. And the two diversions that were made, you saw that they waited on Entebbe Road, Main, the old. They did not know which route they used. They waited at Kawempe and so on when he had been taken via Namugongo. Okay, so that threat of hooliganism along the road was generally neutralized. So I want to respond to that in that way.
Okay.
Now about the EU, I am not a revisionist like my friend here. About international norms, there was a time when slave trade was international value, was the accepted norm. There was a time when colonialism, direct colonialism, was a norm, was international standard by the empires. And therefore, those who are dominant will always try to define what is the international norm. I don't agree. I agree with the Mwenda. First of all, we have too much resources that we don't have to beg. Yes, our leaders over time have been making mistakes to go and beg. Secondly, that begging, whatever we get from them, partly they are making good the theft, the robbery they did previously through slave trade, through colonialism. And in fact, if you can hear them, you can hear him heckling. In fact, if
Africa was the right to talk, and then I'll bring you in.
Africa was more organized,
if there is need for
we should have repudiated the dates they are asking from us if we were better organized. 4. Only this evening on your
many of our governments just steal the money that they give us.
I agree with you.
Including the other 4 trillion in
I agree. First of all, I said we shouldn't be going there for those loans because we don't spend them on the things that we should be spending on them. 2, where there's privilege. Where
the immunization the president talked about, the American money spent on immunization.
First of all, if we're spending our money properly, we should be having our own money to immunize. Finally, I want to say, why do we write our national constitutions? Why do we say we are independent? Because we put up institutions that we believe Our objection to EU resolution, mainly two areas, that EU can sit in parliament and in their parliament and say, directing our courts to discontinue prostitution.
I thought they said we advised.
Are they the ones who advise our courts how to proceed on the cases?
Honorable Mpuga said, as long as you're a net borrower, they will be interested in what?
That's why I said I am not a revisionist. Mpuga may be a revisionist, and he's right to take that direction if he's a revisionist.
Do you have alternative information that
only today, on your news here, the same EU group were telling Africans in Addis that you Africans, specifically IGAD, you are the only people who should sort out the mess in South Sudan.
Okay.
If today they have the wisdom to think that IGAD and Africans can solve the mess in South Sudan, why do they think Africans, or Ugandans in particular, cannot solve if there is a mess in Uganda? And I just want to conclude by saying, our political problems that we have, that everybody acknowledges we have, won't be resolved in EU Parliament. They will be resolved in Uganda by Ugandans, preferably through the popular vote.
And by Ugandans through respecting human rights?
That's where such Kubos who are now in opposition but hiding in NRM perhaps, the Mpugas and others, should concentrate their energy in enlightening Ugandans that this government is no longer
Honorable Sechi, just 1 minute to respond, and then I bring in Mao to
the first one to say Sechku hiding in opposition. You don't have to belong to the opposition for you to speak objectively. Okay. So each time a member of NRM comes up with an objective statement, he hides. He runs now to tarnish or to brand someone as opposition, and let viewers get it properly. That we may not necessarily have to be in the opposition to point out things that do not go well.
Fundamentally, yes.
Because at the end of the day, you are NRM, but principally you must be a Ugandan.
Okay.
But now, lastly, to the issue he was talking about, that after all, they are paying back for what they took, as if there is some reparation that because of the past misdeeds, therefore. But I want to tell that this country has gone through many stages. In fact, the worst period is when Africans are the leaders of Africa. In the 1950s, 1940s, 1920s, there were fundamental changes being made in this country. I do not want to sit here and say that was the best for this country, but all I'm saying is that even after we got our so-called independence, we have run down this country in many respects. It doesn't require you to be a foreigner to see that Ugandans are being mistreated. Ugandans are being brutalized. Ugandans need a leveled playing field. Ugandans need to have impartial security personnel who are not partisan. Ugandans need to have freedom of expression and freedom of assembly. Now, these are very fundamental points and principles. Whether you are in government now, whether you are a former colony, whether you are an independent republic, those must be traversing time and space.
Yeah. Okay. Chairman Mao, finally on this topic, before we shift gears to our last topic of this evening.
Charles, the many voices of condemnation that have come from Kenya, from
EU,
USA, the
Foreign
EU,
Relations Committee
should make us discuss two things. First is how deep our sovereignty is. If sovereignty simply means a national anthem and a flag and a map, that's anybody can have. But if sovereignty means the ability to make decisions, I was in that parliament for 10 years. One time in Athens, I had a big confrontation with the managing director of the IMF, who later became the German president. eventually we became good friends, because I think friendship must be built on speaking the truth to each other. I listened to that debate in the European Parliament. The European Parliament has a lot of powers. They appoint the European Commission, they appoint the President of the Commission, and the Ombudsman. Obviously, a resolution is not a law, even in the Uganda Parliament.
Yeah.
A resolution is important because it means it is the prevailing sentiment.
Advisory, usually.
It is the sentiment. Now, for a country like ours, which is talking about foreign direct investment and so on, there's what you call reputational equity. Our reputation is also our equity. However good you are, if people think you are bad, it's uphill. So I think we should take note. The president, of course, said he doesn't need PR. I have seen the Public Relations Association of Uganda trying to lecture him. When we were having problems in northern Uganda, one of the things we faced was how the rest of Uganda viewed us and why not many were speaking out about the suffering. We had a meeting in London. We called it Kachokema Dit. Somebody talked about PR, and I said, yes, we need PR, but in our case, PR does not mean public relations. It means prejudice reduction. So we have to find ways to reduce the prejudice. For instance, the paternalism of the Western world, thinking Africans are sort of like infants, based on the attitudes of people who call Africa the white man's burden, things like that. But what do you do if you are failing to find something, however small, to build a common ground in a country?
Exactly my point.
Yeah. I mean, why, if you can't solve your problem within your fence, why would the neighbors who have stronger muscles come to force you to do the right thing? And I think that's a dilemma which our government has got to address. I believe strongly that we can't rely on the Western world to come and cause change here. That's our job. In fact, if you are carrying a big piece of luggage and somebody comes to hold it for you, say the European Parliament adds their voice, missions here add their voice, that's not the time for you to pocket and start strolling, saying, yeah, the white people are now going to sort out Uganda. That's the time for you to double your effort. And we have to do a few things. Number one, we have to articulate a vision of the new Uganda. Number two, we also have to build that vision of a Uganda which works for everyone, including Museveni, and those who have made life difficult for us. It must work for all. Today, Eli Tumwine said, these old men are entrenched. Obviously, people, however entrenched, can be removed. Okay. Lastly,
wind up.
I still think we have a lot of work to do to get the real establishments of the Western world to start echoing these views. I was waiting to see the spokesperson of Mr. Trump saying something in that press conference. I saw this lady in the House of Commons pretending that she has not seen anything about MPs being tortured. There's a lot of hypocrisy also. Okay. We must take note of that. Yet, when one homosexual was killed in Mukono, President Obama himself took the podium and denounced it. Okay. So the question is, we must understand the pressure points of the Western world. I speak from experience. For 10 years, we shouted about the camps in the north, the unending war, the killings, and so on. It was as if we were speaking to rocks. But we persisted until one point, the most unlikely president, George Bush, did what we never expected. He appointed Ambassador Tim Shortley to be an envoy. So I believe that today you can't. No.
I think we need to move to the next
topic. I'm not saying that's
Chairman
what ended the war, but it made...
You're trying to present it as if it is what ended the war.
My point...
It was a combination in my view.
My point is how to influence the opinions of decision makers in those so-called international partner states. Okay.
Let's switch gear to the next topic, which is our final topic. What do you want to say?
Because you see, Norbert this evening has spoken like a statesman, justifying the vote I gave him for president in 2011. Not politically. Because let me tell you that for the opposition in Uganda to promote a democratic project, the moderate voices of Muntu and people like Mao need to become the strongest part. Because, you see, to negotiate a democratic transition, from my reading of experiences of Chile, Poland, Czechoslovakia, and many other countries, where you had an entrenched military system, it requires both sides. You see, Mpuga
just
speaks...
military or dictatorship?
Even military. But let me tell you this, that when you listen to Mpuga, you see, the two sides have to give. And each of them has to give a certain degree of legitimacy. They must be willing to compromise, and they will be accused of selling out, especially the opposition. Even when you look at South Africa, the Mandelas, to negotiate. For as long as the opposition is dominated by radical extremists in defiance and people power, I can tell you, I personally think actually Museveni is doing all this to promote Kyagulanyi, to sustain the popularity of the extremist wing which alienates most Ugandans.
Okay.
And therefore, if you strengthen the moderate voices and they become the most dominant force in the opposition, they need a lot of courage and foresight to be able to reach out and on a possible transition in Uganda.
Honorable Mpuga, we need to move to another topic. If we went into that,
like
we could even talk about
promoted.
We could even talk about just next neighbor here, Kenya. I mean, they had to negotiate from Moi
the president
to
talked to the country the other day. He said there can't be any discussion.
He was not welcoming of talks.
I tell you, when I almost brought Museveni and Besigye to talks, and Besigye pulled out of them.
That's for another day. Besigye is not here to tell us the truth. There is a possibility that he has a different story. Honorable Mpuga, let's move to this damning report by the Auditor General against Bank of Uganda. I have with me here a report, a summary of major findings of the Office of the Auditor General from the Special Audit Report of Bank of Uganda on defunct banks. Only Crane Bank, in the Crane Bank transaction alone, 478 billion lost. And the Auditor General is saying that Bank of Uganda went against certain laws. But what is damning is some of the the implications of the findings that I need you, Honorable Mpuga, to start us on. One of them, it says that Bank of Uganda did not do its job as required under Financial Intelligence Act and thereby caused financial loss to the taxpayer, to Crane Bank Limited, to the creditors, and to the shareholders. But there are a number of other evidences that the Bank of the Auditor General is saying that I noted, this is the Auditor General saying, I noted that Bank of Uganda did not carry out evaluations of assets and liabilities in Crane Bank Limited. In absence of the evaluation, I could not establish how the terms for the transfer of assets and liabilities in the purchase of assets and assumption of liabilities were determined, the Auditor General reports. The report adds. And then finally, that this 478 billion was just requisitioned in one day, went through the entire process, and was approved by the bosses in one day. As you know, these are some of the reports that's efficiency. But Honorable Mpuga, start us on this. You are an MP, and you with your team have gone through some of this. I know that Bank of Uganda has been summoned, or is supposed to be summoned. When I was looking through this report, in the next 1 or 2 weeks to come to Parliament. How does this happen? How is the Ugandan taxpayer going to recover this money?
Well, Chairs, first of all, first things first. I am not a member of COSASE, but I've been keen on these investigations. I had occasion to browse through the tidbits of the Auditor General's interim report relating to this subject matter. And I'll tell you that the interim findings can only confirm one thing, that there's no single institution in this country that remains standing for as long as institutional decay remains a hallmark of the NRM regime. The Bank of Uganda, to the outsider, has been one of the remaining or surviving institutions in the face of global, to use the global, institutional malaise in this country, because no institution has been standing. And the fact that the Bank of Uganda has been closing banks, if you read this report, you wonder why itself has not closed. It has not closed. Because if if the principles relating to management of banks, as the custodian of the law relating to management of banks, and looking at how it has been indicted by the Auditor General on institutional decay, on management malaise, you can even hesitate. Remember, the closure of banks started, I think, with Tefe Bank.
Yes.
Sometime in the 90s. And this report says that not even a single document, not even an attachment of a report of this bank closure does exist in the archives of the central bank. Meaning that it was caused somebody either in a bar or in a casino, somebody made a decision, it was closed. No report. No criteria. The central bank does not have any documented criterion or kind of approach or guideline for sale of these bank assets. So if you want the assets, you wake up, go and impress it upon somebody in the central bank, and you have these assets.
Okay.
Most critically, Charles,
Yeah.
The report is terribly indicting. The central bank does not even have a report of the assets so far sold. No valuation was carried out at the sale as the law prescribed, the Financial Insurance Act prescribes. So somebody in the central bank became the liquidator, the regulator. Terrible management malaise. I believe if this report actually represents the true picture of what's at the central bank, the heads must roll, or actually can even say the bank is strong to be standing with this kind of management malaise.
It is a bank of banks. But I need to, Honorable Mpuga, I'm coming back to you. But let me bring in Andrew here. One of the, this report of the Auditor General included even the other, it was inclusive of other defunct banks as well. But Crane Bank was mentioned here. There is one of the implications that the Auditor General talks about, that is on the assets of GTB and National Bank of Commerce, that they were sold sold at a discount with no lawful basis and contrary to the FIA, and that the practical implication of this, that is by the Auditor General, that there was opportunity for fraud between Bank of Uganda officials, transaction advisors, and buyers, and that Bank of Uganda is either incompetent or there was fraud with Bank of Uganda officials concerned. Can we get out of this as a country? Because this is a central bank.
I should tell you, I got deeply involved in the matters of the resolution of, I can see I'm beginning at 2 minutes, not 3. So, yes, because I'm very keen on this.
Please, don't worry, fast talk.
So I was saying, if you look at the matter of Crane Bank, I participated in many meetings on matters of Crane Bank, and I was appalled by the incompetence of the central bank, even their complete disregard to their fiduciary responsibility.
Declare interest first.
Yes.
Declare your interest.
I did not.
Involved as transaction advisor?
I was only a customer. No, I was a customer to Crane Bank, but when they had meetings at State House, the president invited me there to come and attend because I'd been telling him that the way the central bank is handling matters of Crane Bank is completely wrong. So when this meeting started, he invited me there to attend.
But you know that the president, why did he then try to? There were reports in Parliament that there was an attempt by government to stop the investigation by Parliament.
I'm not aware of that. But what I saw after they sold the bank, because me I participated in meetings before they sold the bank. After they sold the bank to DFCU, the following things. I don't know whether the Auditor General says it in his report, but they relied on the buyer's valuation of the bank. You see, yes, exactly. They relied, I come to buy your car and I'm the one who values, and then you sell to me. Conflict. You see, the second thing, you see, if you are going to sell an asset, you must list the assets. At least you can simply say computers, you can say furniture and fittings, you can say some. There is no list of assets that they sold. And of the loans that they sold, there were non-performing loans that had been paid for by the equity of the shareholders worth close to 400 billion. Remember that each time a loan fails to perform, it is written off against the capital or the equity of the shareholders. So they had written off 400 billion, I think it's 385 billion shillings worth of shareholder capital. So these loans were no longer part of the balance sheet. The balance sheet is the statement of assets and liabilities of the bank. So they were literally given 485 billion, rather 385 billion was given for free to DFCU. I don't think that is a sign of incompetence. It is really a sign of fraud. The third thing I saw that was a disaster. The bank had assets of 900 billion, which they sold. They sold them for 200 billion, but DFCU did not pay the 200 billion. What DFCU did, it brought in 200 billion and bought treasury bills from the central bank at 15%. So the government the government pays them, or the central bank pays them 15% on those treasury bills of 300 billion, of 200 billion. Then they would run these other assets where they were earning interest and pay the bank, literally. They do not pay 1 shilling for that bank. In fact, the government of the central bank paid DFCU to buy Crane Bank. This, if the president allows this fraud, and the people who participated in it, to go scot-free, I think it will... Look, this opposition...
Why must it be the president and not parliament? Is it the president
I
to call the
appeal to
shots?
parliament, because I have investigated corruption in Uganda. I have written a book on corruption in Uganda.
Remember, you defended him. Remember?
Please, you can now go and hang them on the...
He actually did. He actually did. But let's go for a break.
But let me first finish the point I was making. The point I was making is that Parliament and the presidency and all other institutions of government, if they allow this blatant fraud. Let me give you an example. The lawyers who negotiated for Bank of Uganda to sell these assets to DFCU, immediately DFCU took them over. They walked across the street, became the lawyers of DFCU to collect money on loans they claimed had...
I'm going to bring in Honorable Sechi
You allow that to continue in this country.
But let's go for a break at this point. This is the Frontline. We are here and we are coming back for the last segment, but stay with us.